Hello and welcome to the Warp News Show. Did you know that over 2 million people have gotten access to electricity, clean electricity, through a very smart Swedish company called Trine? So what Trine is doing is they're crowdfunding investments from private individuals, and then they're lending out that money to companies on the ground, building solar cells and giving electricity access to people in different parts of Africa, in Central America, in India, and other parts of Asia. And then you get your money back, and with a little bit of interest, you make a little bit of profit out of that. So it's really 3 parts of it, and they write this on their website. So it's for people, it's for planet, and it's for profit. And for people in parts of the world, of course, people have no access to electricity at all, or that access is very sketchy and very unstable, unreliable. So they, for example, maybe have to cook over open fire or burn kerosene oil to light their homes. And that creates a lot of particles they breathe into their lungs. And of course, that's very, very dangerous. But it's also for planets, because all that burning of fossil fuels creates a lot of CO2 emissions that ends up in the atmosphere, which drives climate change and global warming, of course. And for profit. So like I said, you lend out that money, you get the money back with some interest, you make some profit out of it, and you can lend it out again to another loan, to another company, or you can take the money out and spend it on something else. So I think this is really smart. These three aspects, we're all winners in this, and that's why I've been investing money through Trine and lending out money from the start. I think maybe I missed the first loan, but I've been there at least in 2017. So it's great. So we're going to talk with Trine about what they're doing, and we're going to talk about one of the companies they're working with on the ground. They're building these solar cells, BBOXX, they're called. So, but before we dive into that, I want to tell you briefly about Warp News, who we are. So our mission is to make people more optimistic about the future. So you can both see the opportunities that are out there, but also grab those opportunities. And we do that by creating and spreading fact-based optimistic news. And we do that to help balance the sort of negative bias you can see in other news media. And by sort of, I mean huge negative bias you see in other news media. That's why so many people, at least in the Western parts of the world, have a pessimistic view of the future, because they read the newspapers and they see, okay, everything's going to, down there. So we try to help balance that with fact-based optimistic news. So if you want to support us and help us with that mission, you can become a premium supporter. So go to our website, warpinstitute.org or warpinstitute.se if you're from Sweden, and there you can sign up for WIP. It's VIP with a W, so it's Warp Important Person. It's $10 a month, and that money goes to helping us with achieving this mission. And the first month is free. So if you think, oh, this is not as good as he said on that video I looked on YouTube, then you can cancel and won't have cost you anything. But I think when you become a supporter, you will stay a supporter, because you'll meet all the other optimistic, forward-looking people in our community, and they're amazing. So I think you want to stick around. But so please check that out on our website. So now let's dive into today's topic. So we're gonna first welcome Hanna Lindquist. She's been part of Trine from the start when they were raising money for their first loan. So welcome to Warp News Show, Hanna.
Thank you so much. It's very fun to be able to join, even though we live in some slightly strange times at the moment.
Oh, definitely. But we can connect like this, so that's great. So tell us about Trine. What is it that you do, and what is it you try to achieve with Trine? How does it work?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is that we help connect private individuals, companies, institutional investors with these fast-growing solar companies around the world. And they operate in places that is typically off-grid and where people, as you mentioned already, do not have access to basic electricity, or if they have access to, say, the grid connection, it's very expensive and so forth. And what we did was that we solved this huge problem. 1.2 billion people lacked access to electricity when we started this a couple of years ago. And we wondered, is it because technology isn't there? What's the problem, kind of? And then quite fast understood that, well, money, and not that there's a lack of money, but that it needs to be channeled. So that's how we set up our investment platform and hope to make it easy for everyone to invest. Because I think that's also one, we probably will touch upon that in our conversation, but I think that's also one of the really problematic things still, is that people might have an perception or assumption that it's very hard or it's not profitable enough to invest in sustainable things. But then you have to think about the fact that the only reason, the way I see it, why you earn so much money or have earned money on oil, etc., is because we have kept pouring money into it. So of course it becomes attractive. And I think if we can do the same now with different sustainable ventures, that's a really, really big opportunity, and also not something we really can't choose between, given the state of the planet today.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very, very good point. You see that in many other areas, that big financial firms are seeing, okay, investments in coal and oil and things like that, they're starting to become less interesting because there's less profits in there, and they see this transformation. So they're starting to invest their money somewhere else. Not, they say it's because it's the good of the planet, and maybe it is, maybe it's part of it, but you also see the profits somewhere else, and that's why I think it's so smart with your setup. It's nothing wrong with charity or giving money, or from taxpayers or from others. Nothing wrong with that, but to really create this long-term sustainability, financially, I think profits is a smart part of it. So it's one thing I like about your setup. You won't become a millionaire by investing in you, but you get a nice interest on the investments. So how have you seen, how has the interest been from private investors, private people like me? Is that the bulk of money coming from those, or is it from other?
So I would say that the majority of the people, so we have roughly 11,000 investors today, just past that, I think just this month or so, and a majority is private individuals. But then of course it can be everything from someone who maybe founded a tech company and exited, to students, to I know, I still remember a lot of our investors, and we have people also who used to be engineers working across the world, and then they are very passionate about solar energy as a technology, and see now that not only is it cool, it's also very viable today, because the price, everything, the quality has improved so much over these decades. So we really have a very, I think is similar to how you describe your community, very diverse and very enthusiastic community of investors. But then I think what's happened in the last year or so is that we are starting to tap into the people who might be, they know they should save and they know they should invest. They might not be particularly that interested in it because you have your bank and so on, but they might not love their bank either, as not so many of us might do in at least in Sweden. So they're looking for other alternatives, but then it needs to be easy and so on. And I think I'm very excited about that change, because it means that you can come a very far way on passion, of course, and engagement, but it is almost impossible to demand that everyone should be fully engaged about everything. Some things is also that, but just make sure that your retirement savings goes to things that you actually think is something you believe in, or set up an account with something so you do not invest in, say, coal factories if that's not something you actually believe is good for your wallet and for the planet. And I think that's really cool to see them coming, and we have some also from the institutional side now who's really starting to look for alternative investments, both as a way, of course, that they see where the planet is heading and kind of the climate, but also as a way to actually future-proof the money in some way, because with all these things happening with our planet, I think there's also become very clear that you might end up with stranded assets, you might end up with really bad deals in some of these sectors. So that's also a huge motivation for some investors to actually look at their portfolio now and see how secure is this portfolio if we would have another drop of oil price, or if real estate goes down again, and so on.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. We've written articles on Work News about Larry Fink, I think he's called. He's CEO of BlackRock. They have $7 trillion under management. It's like there's a lot of zeros in there. Huge amount of money. In his last letter to their investors, he talked about climate change and the risk that climate change brings to investments. So it's not just that maybe coal mines and coal energy is not a good return on investment in itself. But also, if climate change keeps going with natural disasters and things like that, it creates a lot of uncertainty. So, and they want long-term certainty when they invest those kind of huge dollars. So if you can show them, and other players can show them, okay, you can invest your money here and make a nice profit out of it, but you're also doing something good. That's I think is perfect. Let's look at a couple of numbers from your what you have achieved so far. It's when you look at the numbers, you think you've been in operations for decades, but this is just a few years. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, 2.3 million people have gotten electricity through the loans you lend out, and the companies on the ground building solar cells and providing people with electricity. So 2.3 million people, and that's from investments, like you said, from over 11,000 people. Investments of 40 million euro, or in dollars, it's $47 million. This is quite amazing. Do you have any more numbers to share with us of the impact you had so far?
I mean, I think the thing that's obviously it's been quite some CO2 as well, because now we're working also with not only providing households in emerging markets with solar energy, but also with companies who are looking into more large scale, such as factories. So then you replace very much diesel power and so on. I think the latest I heard from a colleague today was that the equivalent of the current CO2 offset so far is that if you would plant 4 million trees over the next 10 years or something. So that is, of course, something that also shows a bit on how efficient it actually is, even if it might not feel like that, when you just replace kerosene, diesel, and so on, and you are able to actually provide an affordable and clean source of energy. But then, I mean, I think also it's always good, I think, for us to get a bit in touch with the outside world, because when you mentioned the numbers, I just kept thinking the whole time, it's just the beginning. But I think it is cool. We are actually putting together today a bit of communication to our existing investors about this, but you sometimes need to reflect and actually see, but we are already doing some really, really impactful things. It doesn't mean it's the end, but it means that we can still be proud of what we've achieved so far together. And I think that's also important to not lose track on, of course, in the bigger spectrum of things.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think it's important whatever you do, but when you have some impact, you stop and pause a little bit and reflect on those things, even if you don't forget, okay, we're going to go to 10 million and 20 or whatever, how many million people you want to help get access to clean energy. That's perfect. But 2.3 million people is rather impressive. And I think that's the brilliance of a good idea and good operations like you run, but also thanks to the internet that you can connect people like this. That's why we are so optimistic in work. We see there's so many possibilities when you connect people, connect their ideas, connect their money, connect whatever it is. You can achieve great things. Also tell the story of Trine. How did this start? What was the idea behind it, and what has your role been, and what is your role in Trine today?
Yeah, so Trine started in, I would say, sometime summer 2014. That was when the idea kind of started. And it was two of our co-founders, Sam and Andreas, who both actually had moved back to Sweden, or Andreas moved here from Austria and Sam moved back from US. And they both had experience in working with energy, clean energy in different formats. And I think both of them wanted to do something that they had a big, strong conviction that why can't you make profit and still do something with purpose? Like, what's saying that you need to do CSR or you need to get rich first and then you can do good in the world? So I think that was kind of the triple bottom line way of thinking of business. And obviously the experience of and realization, I would say, actually foremost in terms of 1.2 billion people at that time, which meant 1 out of 5 people on the planet. So everywhere you will go, it would be 1 out of 5 people who actually didn't have access to things we take so much for granted today. And that kind of kickstarted their thought process. And then they met randomly at a venture, like startup event. And that was how it sort of seeded out that. And, as with all businesses, and I'm sure there's some of you watching might have had ideas or started businesses, it's not super clear. It wasn't even clear when I came in, to be honest. There was a framework, but there was also a lot of we want to do this and that. But it started to drill down, and as I mentioned a bit, to actually see what's the real problem here. And the real problem wasn't the fact that there were no technology available, that there weren't any companies actually doing this. But the problem was that these companies had a very hard time accessing finance, and not just to have finance in terms of the owners and so on, because if you're a company, sometimes you don't want to have too many owners, of course, because you dilute the company. It's early on. It's you don't know who's going to have influence on it, because hopefully you are close enough to what you try to do that you actually know a thing or two, and your owners might not. So we saw that if we could provide that bridge between them, and basically say that you guys know what you're doing best, you know the market, you know the customers, you are really like the heroes in this, but we can be the enablers through connecting you with a lot of people. And I mean, I knew at that time that I didn't think it was a lot of financial options out there if I wanted to not sacrifice on the financial part of an investment, but still feel that it's doing something that I believe will be here in 50 years. And I think that's kind of where we said, okay, let's try it. And let's also prove that this model that we believe in, that if the core of what you do, of the service or product is impact or to do good, then what you should focus on as a business is to run the business as good as possible. And I think that's really been one of the key successes in what we've done over the years, because I've spent very little time, to be honest, actually, to think about sustainability policies or things like that, because sometimes I think that's a way for a lot of established organizations or companies where you want to put a band-aid on something that is not truly working the way it's supposed to. And I think by integrating it in the core, we've been able to really focus on things that excels the business, and where it's really about putting our borrowers as one part and our investors in the forefront. But yeah, it's been, I see a shift already, like over these years, even if we thought 2015 when it really kicked off, that we were we were onto something, and we thought that there were a lot of positive feedback around it. It was still a bit of a hesitation in terms of, isn't it a bit too good to be true?
Okay.
Kind of thought, because people couldn't, I think sometimes, you can't comprehend that. Can you really do good and not become this evil corporation? Or can you do good and still be good at business? Like, can you really combine these two? Now I think we're more in where we have the Norwegian Foundation, for example, in Stockholm. We have a lot of companies around the world who's shown that that it is possible to build. This is actually the future of business, most likely, and it is the kind of products and services that people expect also to her. But I think the financial industry and the energy industry, we're in two industries that still are very large. They are established. So it will take time, of course, to turn it all around. But it looks very positive, I think, in terms of the recent development.
So what has your role been from the start, and what are your role now, Trine?
Yeah. Great question. Almost impossible to answer. My background is in media communication. Been involved in politics as well, and a lot around PR and engagement and so on. Working at Trine, a tech company in the early days, I did everything from UX to a lot of interactions with customers and investors and so on. But I would say that my main focus from the time we've done this has been to different degrees to listen to investors, to engage, spoken with thousands of investors over the years, still remember a lot of them. And it's really the core of what I think the whole company is about. But then I've been had the opportunity to actually be on the forefront of that, to be able to have these conversations, a constant dialogue. Because so much of what we've done and what you see today, if you would go in on Trine.com, it's just actually developed from investors, from feedback we've gotten, from conversations we've had, and from different ideas and inputs that we have received. Because I think that's something that's been very important for me, both in previous lives as well, but especially working with Trine, is that this understanding that you need to constantly improve, and you need to constantly ask yourself, who are you doing this for? Because of course we could do something that we think this is super good and super cool and it's gonna be a success. But if it's not perceived that way by the borrowers or the investors, if they think that what we put on the site, it's too long loan periods, or we don't believe your due diligence process, do you even know what you're doing? Or the borrowers think that we try to squeeze them for all money they have. I mean, I think then we basically failed with the purpose of what we were supposed to do, which was bridge this gap between these parts. So very investor, I would say investor relations and marketing and communication efforts, to summarize it.
Yeah, well, that's what it's like now in a startup, especially from the beginning. You have to do everything. Like I said in the beginning, I'm one of the people investing in some money and lending out money, but who can invest? Who can go into your website and actually sign up there and invest some money? Is it just Swedes, or do you accept people from other parts of the world as well?
So today we accept investors within Europe. So it's possible if you're 18 years old and you're residing within Europe, it's possible. But we are regulated from the Financial Supervisory Authority here in Sweden, which of course means that as much as we would love to offer worldwide investments, that's a lot of processes and works to get that done. But I do hope that we can do that in the future. That's actually been one of the fun things that you hear sometimes people from Kenya or people from different parts of the world where we have borrowers that reach out to us and ask, oh, can I invest in this? And I hope we come to that day when we can say that, yes, it's actually possible for you to invest in the markets where actually this impact is being had as well.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the comments so you can, if you want, you can use that to sign up. So then you get, I think it's 10 euro to start with. I will also get 10 euro, but I will donate those 10 euros to the Warp Institute. So they will end up in my account in Trine, but I will send the equal amount to Warp Institute. So if you want to have 10 euros to start with, so check the comments. Let's talk a little bit about the companies doing the work on the ground, building the solar cells and connecting people and providing that service. So one of those companies is BBOXX. I checked beforehand, so I lended them some money in one of their earlier loans. And now you're up to, what is it, BBOXX number 8, loan number 8. It's 500,000 euros for installations in Kenya. You're already over, at least you were yesterday, already over 300,000 euros, so 60%. Can you tell us a little bit more about that loan?
Yeah, so this is a part of our continuous partnership. I would say that as much as we, of course, are a debt provider, we expect to get the money back, and you as an investor should expect it. But with investments, you also know that there are risks involved, and it doesn't always go as planned. But I would say that apart from that, we are also very much working as a partner, a supporting partner, and we've always seen from the start that if we can grow with the company, that will benefit us and the company. So in the case of BBOXX, that's a bit special actually. It was the first really large loan. So when we started this, well, it's soon 5 years ago, we were looking at quite small loan amounts because we were unproven also in the market, not only among investors, but especially among borrowers, because we were the company saying that, you know what, we can get you X amount of euros in a loan, and we can get it to you within 2 to 4 weeks. And of course, if you don't have a track record, you actually need to work to prove that this is the real deal. So when we signed on BBOXX, one of the leading companies actually in the industry we invest in, which is called off-grid solar energy, we did a huge 1 million euro loan, which was huge at that time. And they've been around, and then we closed 6 million in total with them. And now they've continued to grow, and we just recently signed another additional framework. So this loan we have on the site now is a part of that framework. And it is a very, I personally really like the company because of, and not, I don't want this to be looked as investment advice, but I like the company because what they're doing with the model is that they have a philosophy of energy as a service, which means, to translate this to people who's not into this business, more or less that we're looking to deploy similar to a European energy utility. So instead of paying and owning the systems, which has its benefits, of course, but to be honest, if you're a consumer, you want access to energy. You don't need to own the system to really. Same with if you buy milk or something else, you don't need to own a cow in order to get milk. You want what it can give you. So they have that set up, and that means that customers also can easily upgrade so they can get larger capacity. They have a quite good way of taking care of the customers in terms of, maintenance or repairs and so on. And I think personally that this is where this industry is headed. So it's kind of going from what was very common in the beginning, where smaller solar energy systems would be on a payment plan. So not a loan or with interest, not that kind of leasing, but still that instead of paying everything upfront, you would pay it in smaller chunks over a period of time. And then you would own the system, which had its benefit because you had the free energy. But the downside of it, of course, being that if battery dies or if something happens, it's not as crystal clear what you as the customer do when the commitment of your payment plan is done. So I think this is showing a bit of maturity in this sector where you really are looking to give service to people rather than just sell products.
So this is, in this case, BBOXX. It's BBOXX who owns the actual and the grids, and then you just buy the service, buy the electricity from them.
Which is, of course, also good for a company if you look from a business perspective, because, of course, if you owned all the collateral, it also means that if customers, because this happens everywhere, if customers are not able to pay for different reasons, that they will not be able, or maybe they lost interest. Not so likely when it comes to electricity, but still could happen because other things occur. Well, then here, of course, BBOXX has a better leverage to actually claim back the system, because it's still worth money to be able to be deployed somewhere else. And I think that can be trickier sometimes when it's on the more pay-go model where the customer will end up owning the system, because it can you can sometimes face tougher situations as a sales agent or a person working out on the field when you have to, of course, face customers on a daily basis, and not always in with the best news.
Okay, so so this is €500,000 for installation. Maybe you've seen the ticker here below. It's to get over 15,000 people solar energy, get access to solar energy. And avoiding 5,400 tons of CO2 emissions. So this is the cool thing about being an investor. You get these reports. It's like, wow, I'm actually helped achieve that, and I made money out of it. So it's kind of great. But if numbers is one thing. We're talking about the big numbers here before, 2.3 million people with access to electricity. But it's easy to get for that. Behind those numbers are 2.3 actual persons, so 2.3 million actual persons behind those. So, Max, our producer here, maybe you can put up a couple of slides here, and maybe you can comment on these, Hanna. These are some of BBOXX's customers. So here, Amelia says, as a businesswoman, I need a full-time light assurance. My customers need to feel comfortable and see what they eat, which is hard. It's easy to understand that customers need to see what they eat. And it also says something about the problem, people like this, if you have unreliable access to electricity. Sometimes it's working, or like you said, it's very expensive. Hard to make a profit out of serving people food, for example. But I guess you've seen many cases like similar to this.
Definitely. And I think one thing I always want to highlight is that as much as sometimes we believe that it's all for environment or it's all to make yourself feel good and so on, I think the thing that struck me when I lived in Nairobi and got the chance to meet a lot of both the companies but also their end customers was that it is when it all comes down, all aspects such as health. I mean, it's not very healthy to have to inhale fumes from, say, kerosene lamps or diesel generators, or or safety, as Amelia here is talking about. It really comes down to financial reasons, because you spend so much money, more than you would believe, I think, from our perspective, because we might think about a cozy kerosene lamp when you go out to a cabin, but there it's a reality that you, on a daily basis, have to pay an in proportional amount of your income to that. And also, as Amelia here speaks about, which I've also met a lot of people who it's a lot of informal economic activities in a lot of these countries, right? So it means that you might have a small shop that you open in the night, or you have a restaurant in your house, or you have maybe your a sewer and so on. And all these activities basically shut down at 6 o'clock, for example, in a country like Kenya, if you don't have access to lightning, which means that these people then cannot get more income. And that, of course, has other additional impacts on not only their families, but also on the economy as a whole. So I think that's really good to remember, that a lot of times it's not about being an environmental hero. I'm sure Amelia hopefully thinks it's good to replace fossil, but it's really about making a logical choice in terms of how can I get a better income, how can I sustain and support family, and maybe give back to society in terms of jobs and such forth. And that shows how really crucial electricity is for a lot of people, even if you look at it and you think about, oh, it's great that she gets a better position. But when you think of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people getting the same, hopefully that's the start of when you really can uplift a whole local community.
Right, exactly. Yeah, precisely. It solves some real problems, and it's not just the obvious effect of she getting or her customers seeing what they eat. It's also a lot of other positive effects.
I do like these people.
Right. So the next slide. It's Giselle in Congo. It has been a game changer for my business, and my kitchen is always ready to be used. The customers can arrive and eat a warm dish at any time. So it's similar to Amelia in the other one. You can jump to the next slide, Max. And this is a guy in Rwanda, and I like the last sentence there. Because of the light, I am able to feed my goats. So that there's another aspect of this. When you work late, you get home, you need the light. If without the light, you can't do much of the chores that you need to do. So maybe you have to do them during the day, and then you can work. And there's some those kind of aspects also to it.
And I mean, it's both in terms of what he's pointing to, of course, being able to go and do it because you need to see what you're doing and so on. But I also know a lot of households and that have reported that it's also about security, in the sense that a lot of them, they might have different livestock, but without the light, there can be animals and thieves and so on coming close to and actually steal it. And by having, so some of these solar lamps, or most of them are usually put also one on the outside of the house, so it's on, so you actually get a better surveillance and make sure that the things that you live off as a family is not disappearing. And I think that's also one thing that one would feel, yeah, of course you should be able to do that, but it is not guaranteed for all of these families.
Right. No, precisely. So I have another last question for you. If people watching this want to get involved somehow in helping bring electricity and clean energy to people all over the world, of course, one thing that we've been talking about is investing and going to your website and doing that, and I hope a lot of people do that. But if they want to get involved in some other way, so maybe they want to start a company that solves another problem, or there's another opportunity, or something else, what other things do you see out there that needs help, that needs people coming up with ideas that you are trying or not being able to address now? Some other other problems you see on the ground, or some other things. What are the opportunities you see out there for people who want to become active in this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things obviously to be done, and I which I guess similar to you, see that as opportunities. I mean, not to downplay the fact that it's about people and it's real issues, but we also need to think, how can we solve it? I think one way to start with is that If you work in an organization, in a company, you most likely have heard about the Sustainable Development Goals, but have you then looked closer how you solve, how you address those? Because I think in those, it's actually one of the few frameworks I've come across that actually have a good way of capturing a holistic way of looking at how can we make life better for everyone, basically, living on this planet. And there's a lot of things there that are not addressed or are addressed, but it's taking too long. And I think you can come up with a lot of business ideas based out of that. We happen to do it a bit the other way around, that we had the idea because we had the 1 billion people without access to electricity, of course, in mind. But then after, it's become more and more clear in how many different ways this is actually contributing. As for else, I mean, I think it's also to, as a just private individual, I would definitely look at things as, where are my savings going? Where are the companies on the stock market that I actually prefer more? Because I think they will lead the development. They will not have to be defensive in 5 or 10 years, because the development and progress of technology and everything else has moved so fast. So now they just need to see how can we survive. I mean, I would want to be with the front runners, the ones who's already today looking ahead in the future and kind of developing the type of food we're gonna eat, the type of transportation we're gonna take, and so on. And I mean, but it is, I think it's hard to sit here and give advice in that sense. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things to look into. You can go to Google, which is the industry organ for everything in the off-grid sector, and then you will find a lot of things, most likely. And there's a lot out there. I'm sure Warp can help you as well to get into it. But I think personally, I really believe that money and capital has a huge influence. And if we can direct that issue of where is our money today going, either if it's in the company I work in or what my money is doing on the free time, I think that is the way to really be able to tackle a lot of global challenges, because without it, there will be very difficult for people working with these ideas to actually get established and be successful.
All right. Thank you very much for joining the Warp News Show, and thank you so much for the work you're doing and Trine is doing. It's having a real impact. So thank you very much, Hanna.
Thank you. Take care.
So thank you so much for watching and listening to this. I think where we ended there is an important lesson from this. Peter Diamandis often say that the world's biggest problems is the world's biggest business opportunities. That's absolutely right. This is a huge problem, people lacking electricity. It's also a huge business problem. So you can do some real good things for other people, impact for the world, and you can make a lot of money out of it. And I think that's a perfect combination. But there's also a ton of other kinds of projects that you can do, for profit or non-profit. So a ton of things to do out there. So the next Warp News Show is next week. We're going to talk about food tech, another area where there's a lot of disruption, a lot of things, very interesting things going on. And so tune in for that. You can tune in live on September 3rd, or watch it afterwards here on YouTube. And one great way to not miss future videos from Warp News and future Warp News Show is to subscribe to this channel. Let's see what else I was supposed to tell you. Yes, and we also have a free newsletter, one in English and one in Swedish. So you just go to warpinstitute.org or warpinstitute.se if you're from Sweden. You can sign up there, and then once a week you get an update with some of the fact-based optimistic news going on out there. There's so many news to write about, and we just write about a few of them. but there's so much, but we need to spread them more. So please subscribe to that and share them with your friends in social media, for example. So, yes, that was it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great week, and make the future come sooner.